everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today again at R.H.E podcast. Respect, humility, empathy. Those are the three values that we're striving for every single episode. We're striving to be better versions of ourselves and better versions of each other for the future in our conversations. And this is just one step in the right direction. So that being said, I'm joined by two atheists today. So it's a 2-on-1. And would you mind introducing yourself, Robert?
My name is Robert. I am a hard atheist and a secular humanist. I'm also a freelance writer. I have a couple of books under my belt, and I run a secular humanist page, the Church of the Basement Dragon.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay, that makes sense. You have the dragon at the Last Supper, right? I think I saw that.
Yeah, that one's mine.
Can you give us a 1-minute sales pitch on your website, please? We'll post a link to it.
Oh, sure. It's facebook.com/basementdragon. And the basic idea is to provide a secular perspective on social issues, as well as to advocate for humanism. I have written on subjects in science, particularly biology, but also on matters of education and culture. I do occasionally write about news, but it's primarily focused on those other fields.
Great. And Sid, can you introduce yourself for a minute, please?
Yeah, my name's Sid. Actually, I might even be a member of the Basement Dragon Facebook group. I'll have to go check. I'm on several of those groups, so I think that sounds familiar. I'll have to double check that. But yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't like terms like hard, soft atheism. I just don't believe. So I mean, I think that's kind of a blanket term, and there's some confusion with that word anyway. But anyway, for whatever that word's worth, that's what I am. I don't write. I don't. I don't do much else. I do a little bit of arguing on Facebook. I live up in. What's that?
You write. You write rebuttals online.
Yeah, I do. I like poking holes in people's ideas, and I like have my ideas have holes poked in them too, because that's how you learn. So anyway, that's me.
Yeah, great. So I got a quick question. Do either of you watch or in the past or have watched WWF?
When I was a kid,
yes. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah, when I was a kid.
I had a guest on yesterday, and I had mentioned in South Korea they do headshots, and when they do it in wrestling, and South Korea tries to edit out all that violence, right? So when they go to take the headshots, it just cuts and you see the person on the floor, right? Actually, I love seeing the headshot. I still like to watch WWF, but I still call it WWF. But so actually, me and the atheist guy started talking about wrestling for a while. It was pathetic. Two grown men discussing wrestling, but it's pretty funny. So actually, I do want to say this, Robert. You've had about 20 guests so far. I think Robert has had a profound influence on my life. There's been many things that he said that's just made me stop and wow, at least take a minute to process it. And Sid's great. Sid's joining me now as an occasional host, as you can see now. But Rob, I can't thank you enough, man. As a father, as a human, I consider myself a humanist, and really think you're making some great contributions. And this is your 4th time on now, so you're an all-star.
Time flies. Well, thanks. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed doing this a great deal.
I want to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker, and I want you guys to tell me like a strange coincidence, either a coincidence or an experience you might have had that you might have confused for being of God. And I want to start with you, Sid, because you could either talk about your aneurysm thing, or maybe just a coincidence, something else that's happened in your life that maybe you might have interpreted as supernatural.
Yeah, I got diagnosed a couple of years ago with temporal lobe epilepsy, and one of the symptoms I had was I would have every so often I'd have a strong, all of a sudden a strong feeling of deja vu, like super intense. and at the same time there was a whole bunch of nausea that would come with it. So to a point at a couple of times I'd throw up.
Ooh.
So and those started to intensify as in frequency and type. And then when I went in for my bone marrow transplant, when you go in for a bone marrow transplant, which is unrelated to the epilepsy, I didn't even know I had it.
Mm-hmm.
But that feeling, like, and after I got diagnosed with what that was, it was a temporal epilepsy. And one of the neurologists I was talking to, he asked me to describe all these symptoms, and he's totally nodding and writing stuff down. So he asked me, he goes, did you have any, did you play any contact sports when you were a kid? I said, everyone that could hurt your head, I played. Like, you name it, I did it.
Curling?
So
no. Is that curling or hockey?
No. Hockey, football, rugby, boxing, anything that involved smashing your head against something, that's what I did. So I said to him, well, what do we do about that? He says, you could invent a time machine and go back and tell your younger self not to do all that. But anyway, as a side thing, but no, I never, when I had those, and it turns out they're called auras is the technical term. They're a precursor to a seizure. It's just not as many neurons are involved with the misfiring. But I can tell you that the intensity of those experiences and feelings, it would seem, if you didn't, if I was born 500 years ago and had those experiences, I could see where those could be interpreted both by myself and other people, that you had some connection with something. Like, there's some reason you had those. But as far as in a personal experience, I mean, when I had the bone marrow transplant, I had several, like, I had liver failure, I had pneumonia at the same time, I had pericarditis, which is a swelling around the heart. There were a bunch of medical problems with going through the transplant process. But I never had once what I would call none of that experience. Even I didn't even think of anything divine with what I was going through. I mean,
interesting.
I just never had that experience. I don't want to make something up, but I've never had that experience where something's happened to me where I go, could that be something? No, I've never had that.
One quick thing before we move on. If you could either say one coincidence, a big coincidence, the biggest coincidence, and two, can you explain the opposite of the deja vu? What did you call that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I've had a coincidence where, like, I was walking with my nephew, and he misheard the traffic lights, because in Canada, I don't know what it's like down in the States or in Korea, but for blind people, when you walk up to an intersection, the crosswalk, when it goes for the one direction, it makes a different tone than if it's going for the cross direction. So that if you're blind and you hit the crosswalk, it allows a blind person to figure out, which set of lights have changed.
Wow.
So as soon as we got to the crosswalk, two buttons were pushed at the same time, one for our direction, one for another direction. And as soon as the light changed for the other direction to go, this lady behind me asked a question about the dog that I was walking. So I turned around and answered her question. My nephew heard ding, ding. He didn't differentiate between which way. He didn't look at the lights. He just started walking out traffic. So him and the dog he was walking, they both almost got hit by a truck.
Wow.
Now that's, I mean, I don't know how you measure almost. I don't know if that's the right kind of story you're looking for, Isaiah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. And as to I had a couple of experiences that were called jamais vu, which is the opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite of deja vu. And the only thing I could relate it to is older people with dementia or Alzheimer's. It's where all of a sudden everything is unfamiliar, the place you're in, even though part of your brain is like, yeah, I know I'm in a place I know, but most of your brain is like, I have no idea where this is, and all these people that look really, really familiar around me, I don't know who they are.
Wow.
And I had two of those instances up at work in Northern Canada.
Oh, that's scary. Oh my God.
The deja vu, the deja vu where everything was familiar, those little episodes lasted like 30, 40 seconds. These two incidents I had with this jamais vu lasted about 10 minutes each.
Wow.
So that was, and I can see why Alzheimer's patients get agitated, because I think, well, I don't know if it's similar to that, but it's part of your brain knows this is all familiar, but then most of your brain's like, I don't know who anybody is. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't even know how I got here.
I was party to this, but I was too young to really have been part of the experience. I was born with a heart condition. and it required a surgery that was
Wow.
experimental at the time.
Wow.
And my mother is a very devout woman, and she was in the waiting area while they were doing surgery on me, and she has always been convinced that while she was in the waiting area, that she saw angels and demons fighting over people's heads, the other people in the waiting area where she was, fighting, I guess she assumed, over the fates of those who were, in surgery or something. She has always had these kinds of, I guess you could say, vision-like experiences. She doesn't speak much of them, but they have always been part of her life, and she has always assumed that these came from God.
Wow. So would you attribute that to like either wish fulfillment or maybe some kind of temporal lobe epilepsy, as we call it?
That particular specific incident, I would say, was more likely the result of exhaustion than anything else. Worried mother, up late, not sleeping, in a high stress situation, pulling on cultural touchstones for some form of comfort or to explain her current state. I once, as an experiment in college, went about 5 days without sleep just to see what that was like.
Wow.
Yeah. And by the end of it, I was hallucinating. So
you were really?
I went to sleep. Yeah. It was kind of trippy, but it's not something I would do again.
I think
it was
I
an
did
interesting
that
one-time experiment.
Yeah, I think I did that 3 days. I didn't make it 5, but I remember starting to lose like control of hearing either sounds or flashes that were intense, and just kind of like not being able to fully grapple with everything that was in front of me. So when I was in college, I was delivered mail, and I was a mailman for our students, right? And so I had everyone's numbers memorized, right? So it's funny because I'd meet someone and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, what's your name?" And I'd be like, we'd introduce ourselves, and I'd be like 556, and they're like, "Yeah. How'd you know that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm the mailman, right?" Anyway, so one day, I'm putting the mail into people's things, and one of them falls out of my hand, right? And somehow or another, I couldn't explain the physics of this, but it fell and it went into a mailbox. I mean, imagine how difficult it would be to drop a letter and have it go into a mailbox, right? But dude, it was the lady. I still remember her number too, 822 Brenda Bellamy. It somehow went into her, and it has zero relevance for anything in the world. But I don't know how. I would never be able to explain that one. I would have never imagined. Let me start this. I would have never imagined how important it would be to define terms. Because when I started to even mention some of these things online or respond to some stuff, I could not believe the wide range of word usage, word usage that someone would use to say that the supernatural exists. So, for example, one of the guys I was talking to, he says, well, the natural or the supernatural, anything that would happen in the natural universe would be natural. Therefore, the supernatural, if the supernatural did exist, it just would be natural. And I was like, wow, with that line of reasoning, you could never lose an argument. Because even if God, I said, so if God just came down to start speaking to you, like that would be a natural event. He's like, yeah, well, you won the argument already. There's no way you could reason around that one. So I guess before we even start off, we need to clearly define the terms that we're using. So Robert, how would you define a supernatural? That's the topic of today.
Okay, so I think the importance of defining these things comes from the person who's asserting them. So I generally leave the definition of the supernatural to the one who says it exists.
Okay.
I've actually used that position almost verbatim that you were just talking about, is that if the supernatural is part of reality, then it would by definition be natural. It would be an element of the natural we might not know much about, but it would be part of the natural universe in which we exist. So, but if I had to boil it down to one single word, it would come down to a definition for, or another word for magic.
Magic. Okay. What about you, Sid? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of run into the same problem. Sometimes it's accidental. Lots of times people will start, they use equivocation fallacy where they'll start twisting the meaning of a word in an argument to kind of fit their narrative. So yeah, I find that a lot online. I'm perfectly happy. Like Robert was saying, I'm perfectly happy if someone is arguing for a position like a God or the supernatural. I let them define what they're talking about, because if you say the word God, you could have a million different people with a million different ideas of what that word means. And there's lots of assumptions that when you say that, oh, we're talking about the Judeo-Christian God. Well, that may not necessarily be true, or it could be true, but the person you're talking to may have all kinds of attributes for that have nothing to do with what are typically Judeo-Christian attributes of what God is. So I'm a big fan of the, being Canadian and the Queen's English and all. I'm a big fan of the Oxford Dictionary. I mean, it is the base dictionary for everybody else. No offense to Webster.
Hey, come on, man! I was going to say we're American here. How are you gonna play that card with us?
So I kind of like their definition. It just says of a manifestation or event attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. When I think of that, I think of things that used to be supernatural because we didn't have an explanation for them. So, for example, if you went back a certain amount of time in human history, we had no real explanation for lightning.
Right.
So, like the Norsemen would say, well, that's Thor hammering, hitting his hammer, and that's the discharge from his hammer. Okay, so after a certain amount of time, that changed because now we gain knowledge about how static electricity is conducted in the atmosphere and how it discharges. And so we went from a supernatural explanation for lightning to a natural explanation. To a natural explanation for lightning. Yeah, I can understand, Isaiah, when you say, well, if somebody says once, because I kind of lean more towards Robert's position, because once something manifests and you can measure it in the universe. So if a God came down and said, okay, I'm God and here's all my powers, and even if his powers were beyond our understanding of what he could do, he could read everybody's mind, he could raise the dead, he could do all these miraculous things or supernatural things.
You mean natural things?
Well, natural. Okay. Well, to us, they'd be supernatural or magic, like as Robert said, magical. Well, I mean, I forget which science fiction writer wrote, but technology to a certain level to somebody that's not at that level will appear magic. A gun to a caveman would appear magical because you pull the trigger and all of a sudden the animal's dead, and you didn't see anything. You heard a big bang, you didn't see anything happen. Down goes the animal, right? So, I mean, but if God does do that, if he appears, or a God appears and has all these powers and proclaims that, I don't know how he all of a sudden isn't part of nature. Now you could have a scenario where something manifests in the natural world and is beyond the natural world, because we have evidence, or not evidence, but there's certain theories in physics as to how many dimensions are there. Is there 3, 4, or a dozen, like some string? I'm not a physicist, I can't go into that, but I know that there are some physicists that, based on their mathematical formulations, have come up with this idea of a multiverse or a multi-dimensional existence that we're only a slim part of, and we only have a base understanding. But all we can do is try to understand the universe we live in.
First of all, we're Americans, so we're going to go by the American definition there, Sid.
I see.
No,
all right.
North American. Okay.
The freedom definitions.
Actually, you are North American, so I got it really, the USA, right? Canadian and North American, right? Okay, so how about this one? Of or relating to an order of existence beyond the visible, observable universe. Okay, that's interesting. Especially of or relating to God or a god, demigod, spirit, or devil. Okay, so these are all, I think we're at a very good start here. We made some leeway, and we can start to say that, look, suppose either of you were to see me do some magic, some genuine, not like sleight of hand, not anything like that. Okay, just suppose I did. And suppose, again, this is totally hypothetical situation here. Suppose I was harnessing the power of my mind to do so, okay? And obviously that's going to be magic to you, but according to your definition, if I was able to do it by some means that you just didn't know about it, right? That would be, even if it was magic, then it would be, by your definition, natural, correct? Correct?
Yeah, like if you became Professor X beyond the hairstyle. Yeah.
Hey, Rob, you don't have
Professor
much hair.
X.
Robert, you don't have much hair yourself, bro. I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, stick with it, man. The bald look rocks. All right. So Professor X has powers, but he's not considered to be magical. He just has a natural aspect to himself, which is distinct from other living things.
Because X-Men describes as evolution, right? Those are genetic mutations. Okay.
Right. Yeah, he's just got a mutation that is unique to himself.
I got it. All right. So that being said, we'll try to take this as far as we can with well, let's just start this. Let's just get right into the meat and taters of this. There's a lot of people who make claims about the supernatural things right now, such as psychics. We actually had a psychic on the R.H.E. podcast, but do you believe that, we'll start with you, Robert. Do you believe that that's done via either cold readings or, quackery or things like that? Do you think they actually believe the things that they are practicing? Oh, what's your opinion on that?
I think there's a combination of both things. I think there are definitely those who go in knowing that they're frauds, and then I think there are others who genuinely believe that when they're reading cards, they're telling the future and things like that. Maybe the one who goes in as a fraud might convince themselves that they actually have some sort of special power. Suppose any of those things can happen.
So so it's kind of like a wish fulfillment. That's interesting. I want to share with you a quick story in South Korea. I was hosting this Chinese woman at my house because I'm involved with this website or I was before having a child, but it's called Couchsurfing. And you host people from all over the world. They come stay with you a couple of days, couple of weeks. And then later on, when I went traveling, I'd go and stay with these people, right? So it's a really good trade-off. So anyway, I hosted this girl from China, and I'm an atheist at the time. So she's like, yeah, can I read your palm? And I'm like, thing is ridiculous, beyond ridiculous. But I'm like, okay, sure, here. So I gave her my palm. And mind you, she's a guest in my house. She has absolutely no reason. She has no reason to say what she's about to say. If she were to say positive things, that would make sense, right? It would make sense. You want to appease the person who you're staying with because you're a guest in the house, right? She doesn't know anything about me. This is her first time meeting. Call this a cold reading or whatever. Maybe she's picking up, energy, subtle ticks in me. I don't know. But she took my hand and she went on about 7 different things that were 100% accurate about me, not one of which was positive. And after the 7th time, I was like, okay, I almost wanted to kick her out of my house, honestly. She didn't have anything positive to say about me. And I was like, I don't know what the heck you did. I would naturally think you got some kind of information. I don't know if she looked at my Facebook or something, but I was like, it freaked me out, man. What is your thoughts about that, Sid, about what Robert just said, about maybe there's quackery or some kind of cold reading going on? Do you think that's possible?
Oh, I for sure. I think there's there's lots of frauds in that kind of business. I mean, there was the Israeli fella, Uri Geller from the 70s.
Yeah, I remember.
And he claimed he could move pencils, he could move objects with his mind, and they brought him on the Johnny Carson show, and they had what was the
that Robert Randy,
the great Randy, right? Whatever his name is, Randy, whatever.
James Randy.
Yeah, James Randy. Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay. He's a magician, professional magician, right? Yeah. And he told Carson how to set up the test for this pencil mover or moving pages. And what they did is they put a piece of plexiglass over top of the phone book so that the pages couldn't move by Yuri breathing on them. So he got all frustrated and said the vibe wasn't right. And, you know, I think people like that are basically con artists.
Okay.
Now, there's other people that, like, I had a landlady that when I lived on Vancouver Island, and she was into spiritualism, whatever. She wanted to do tarot cards with me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. So we sat, and you know, I thought, well, you know, better than TV, better than watching reruns, right? So we sit down, and she's got the cards going, and she's sincerely into this. Like, she's reading cards and this, that, and the other stuff, and some of the stuff she said about me was, you know, I think was a lot of those people. Not that I've done it a ton, but I think a lot of those people can keep things kind of vague, and they respond to your visual cues. There's a lot of body language stuff going on. You're shifting, are you defensive, are you you know, so I think she's unconsciously, I don't think she's consciously doing it, but I just think unconsciously, because so some of the things she said were right in a sense, like they were, you know, some of those things apply to me, some of those things didn't. But at the end of it, when we got all done, I told her, I said, well, next week I'm going to be across the other side of the island doing some work. I said, could we do this over the phone? And she says, no, it doesn't work that way.
Wow.
So I think with the same thing with your palm reading lady, I bet you anything, if you would have said to her, well, if I sent you a photograph of my hand, could you read my palm over the internet and come back and get back to me? I bet you anything she'd say no, because she'd say, no, I have to look at your hand. I'd have to actually physically hold your hand and look at it. But I think that's an unconscious thing that they need to look at this feedback from you. Because she just said, no, the card reading doesn't work over the phone. I said, oh, okay.
That's really, I mean, again, this podcast, I would never even think about like something that you just said right now. So I love interacting with people, because this gives me a totally, I'll say it again. I thought about changing this to called like a parallax switch, where scientists take a picture of a star, and then 6 months later they take a picture of the same star on the other side of the sun, and they see the shift that happens, like when you close your eyes from one spot, you know.
Yep.
And they're able to somehow use trigonometry to see the shift and figure out how far the star away is. But
right, that
is interesting. I just say that's interesting. First of all, not exactly all Christians believe in the supernatural or in demons. I went to Bible college, for example, that they just didn't believe in like signs of the Spirit, signs of the Holy Spirit, and they didn't believe like in demons. And so I grew up Pentecostal, where they talked about demons and speaking in tongues and miracles like every other service. So it was a little strange going from that to where they didn't talk about things like that, right? They thought that people like that were quacks. So it was a bit of a culture shock that I was in such a and top it off, it was in the Midwest, right? So I went to school. I was from California, but went to school in Missouri. So there's a lot of culture shock I experienced there. But my opinion is that it wouldn't matter if you read a crystal ball or a hand or a whatever it is. Like, I do believe in extra dimensional beings that inhabit the earth. Maybe they're sitting right next to us right now, honestly. The Quran would describe him as being jinn, and they're like basically just like us, you know, they're basically just like kind of like people, but you can't see them. But so it wouldn't matter whatever you were using to try to communicate with whatever these beings, if you were able to do so. And I'm not saying everyone does, because there's obviously quacks who just want to make money, right? There's obviously people who will feed on people's fears or people's insecurities just to make money. And Christians do that as well, if we're being honest. But it wouldn't, so it doesn't matter if you read a palm or tarot cards. If you're able to tap into those, if it's chicken and tails or whatever, tea leaves, then they're going to be able to give you information that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So if you were to regurgitate that information back to somebody else, let's say, for example, my mom's name is Susan, it would seem like, whoa, you just somehow, or, you know, if you read my PIN number, if you knew my PIN number or something like that, obviously there's ways you could get that information, but it would appear that way. Let's just say if they have other information, it would appear that way, you know. Anyway, do you guys know Matt Dillahunty?
Yep.
Yeah.
So So I just watched.
Well, I don't know him, but I've seen him. Yes.
Actually, his just show is the epitome of what I try to the opposite of what I tried to do with R.H.E podcast. I mean, he flat out tells people to shut the F up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, whoa, I kindly ask people not to interrupt, but I would never tell someone to shut the F up or anything like that. So, but anyway, he said that his mom has seen demons, and he said his mom has seen demons, I guess similar to your mom. And I think whenever you have your own mom, like, it's pretty hard to say this person's crazy, right? I don't know, maybe you do think your mom's crazy, but what do you think are some possible explanations when people do see demons or angels? We've kind of thrown some stuff out already, but do you have any other explanations, Robert?
Well, I think it has to do with simple mental states. I mean, we know enough about the brain to know that our senses and our experience cannot always be relied upon. And there have been cultures that manipulated this intentionally in order to induce these kinds of states to where we hallucinate. I mean, the very fact that the word hallucination exists tells you that we can't always trust even what we see. So I think it has to do with brain states themselves. It could be tumors, it could be a chemical imbalance. I'm not a neurologist. That would be more in line with what you want to talk to there. But I do think it's explicable through a greater understanding of the brain. Okay, fair enough. What about you, Sid? You're probably going to say the same thing too, right?
No. Well, I mean, I would agree with most of what Robert said. One of the things I would say is there is some cultural bias in what people experience when they experience something like that. Like, for instance, in the Middle Ages, people would have experiences of witchcraft or having an evil eye put on them, or seeing angels and demons. You do a cultural shift in some time period from the Middle Ages to now, well, all of a sudden people are maybe seeing aliens, or they're seeing, whereas one point in time, because of their cultural background, they would have saw an angel or a demon. Now maybe they're seeing aliens. That's one possible explanation for it. From my own personal experience, both with the temporal lobe epilepsy and some fun in college, I know you can
Nice.
alter your perceptions of lots of things. I mean, lots of native tribes use everything, peyote, magic mushrooms, you name it. They've used them in ceremonies to, like Robert was saying, induce this state of hallucination so they can have this spiritual experience. I'm not going to deny any of that. I mean, I've had some trippy experiences with that. I wouldn't at all call them spiritual. But and like I say, with the brain's a funny thing. You damage your brain a little bit, like I did. Yeah, it'll do weird things to you well, of course, every experience you have in life is subjective because it's your senses feeding information to your brain. So if you alter that somehow, your brain, it's very hard for your brain to tell the difference between what what is actually objectively real or what you're experiencing. You could be experiencing, because people have I've had auditory hallucinations. I've had that thing where I forget what they call it, but when you first wake up, sometimes you feel like you're trapped. You can't.
Oh, sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis.
Right, sleep paralysis. I've experienced
that. That's some scary junk.
Yeah,
man.
It is. Like if you're kind of there and you're kind of not sure if you're awake or not, but you can't get up, you can't move. Yeah. So I've had those experiences. So your brain can trick you lots of different ways, but that doesn't mean the person experiencing it doesn't experience something. Of course they do.
Yeah,
because it's their brain, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I really appreciate the fact that Robert says he believes that I believe that I experienced God, but he doesn't believe that I actually did experience God. That's an interesting. I mean, some people just say my family just say like, oh, you're just making this up. You know what I mean? I think for me, it's like really, you think I'm gonna make something up that like it's gonna make me sound crazy like this? Like I tell people about my past life before I was a Christian, the way I behaved, the kind of foolish behavior I did, and I'm like, some people just don't believe like that's the things that I've done, and I'm like, you really think I would make something up like this that shows me in this bad of light? Like really, what is the purpose? What kind of sense does this make? I could understand if I was making stuff up where I was like, yeah, I did all of this great stuff, like because sometimes I do tell people, you know, I've been overseas, I traveled all these countries, and people think I'm lying about it. You know, I've had people call me a liar, and I'm like, yeah, you know, that actually makes sense if you think that I'm lying and bragging about the positive stuff, but I'm telling you about like some of the deepest, darkest skeletons in my life that's not comfortable to talk about. You know, there's no way I would want to make something up like this. Let's just say that it takes a lot of courage to expose some of these sides of myself from the past, that it's a lot more convenient to hide it. But even to talk about, yeah, you know, I have experienced some evil stuff in this universe, man. Absolutely. I think in this podcast, with Robert and Sid, is the only time that I've ever actually entertained maybe what I experienced was just a total natural hallucination. You know, I think Sid for that, because your experience that you're talking about has made me at least entertain that. I don't think that that's true, because a lot of the things that I have experienced got confirmed externally from what I was experiencing in my mind. So that, in that sense, I don't think that that's a reasonable explanation. Let's just say that. If it all happened in my mind, totally, I would say, yeah, absolutely, call BS, totally. But I've had so many things happen outside that have either immediately after or very close after that confirmed it, that went along with that. So that's my own personal experience. But if you or no one else is convinced by that, I totally get it, because my own family thought I didn't believe all this stuff about my experiences, you know. So I want to ask you guys both another question. You guys might easily be able to answer this one already, but why has it been that every culture in history hasn't had an idea of supernatural and or other world visitors, including angels and demons? Because it seems like every culture, I mean, go back into the Aztecs, go back into the Mayans, go back into the ancient Greek mythology, and you know, the Egyptian mythology. You have like this pantheon of gods that are good and gods that are bad. So what does that say about humans if everybody is and not just like 90%, I'm saying like 100% of cultures have thought that these things are all real? So what does that say about humanity, or what is an explanation? Start off with Sid. Both of you guys answer that, please.
Sure. I mean, that wouldn't be surprising that humans have had that experience. If you think about, now, depends what you believe. If you believe that, you know, and I do, the theory of evolution is true and we evolved. If you think back to our ancestors out in the savannah in Africa, and you hear a branch break, you're gonna immediately think agency, because that's a sort of survival mechanism, right? Branch breaks, you respond like it's a predator. If you're wrong, that's no big deal. If you don't respond, you think, oh, well, you know, the wind just blew a branch out of the tree and it broke. If you don't respond and it was a predator, then you could die and you get weeded out. So, you know, dogs have agency. Dogs believe in agency. They hear something break in the bush, they start barking, because they don't think the branch broke itself. They think something broke the branch, right? So if that's natural in the animal world and we evolved out of the animal world, it's going to be natural that human beings, as we evolved, developed this agency and then expanded it because we have creative brains. So it's not just agency that, oh, a branch broke, maybe that's a predator. Now it's agency that, oh, you know, the crops didn't grow right this year. Maybe we didn't sacrifice the right people to make the crop god happy, or we had drought. The rain god must be appeased because the rain god didn't deliver the rain like he usually does. So I think there's been a natural progression, and that was going to be one of my critiques of Justin's book, because he talks about that in there. All these cultures have had all these experiences with the supernatural and gods and such. Well, why wouldn't we? Why would, if you don't understand how the weather works, if you don't understand how disease works, if you don't understand how disease works, of course it was your neighbor's wife gave you the evil eye and your kid got sick. Because something must have happened. It's not natural. There's some agency that happened to make that kid sick. So I'm not surprised that almost every culture has had some level of supernatural or believe in a supernatural intercedence in events, because for a long time we didn't know a lot about how the world worked, and of course it's natural just to say, well, something caused it, somebody caused that.
Hey, Rob, I want to let you answer that next, Rob. I do want to say this. So I went down into Haiti after the earthquake, and I was doing some volunteer work there with the rebuilding process. But I wrote a book about my experience in the history of Haiti. And one of the guys I was talking to, we were talking about slavery and such. And he told me this, that if a slave master would like beat the slave, they would get a doll, and they would hang it on the door. They would hang it on the door as like a signal to the person, like the house slave. Okay, so the house slave might do something like poison their food, and they might get sick. And the master would see the doll, and they would make this assumption that they were like picking it with needles or something like that. You've all seen the voodoo dolls, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be an example where there was a natural explanation. And again, as you just said right now, Sid, that's a really good possible explanation, where you see something like that and you make the connection there. But the reality is that someone's just doing something, right? What about you, Robert?
I don't necessarily think that every single culture has a religion, gods, etc. I recall reading some years ago about a people, I want to say they were called the Paraha. Sounds kind of like Piranha, and I might be pronouncing it wrong. Paraha. But they're a small culture, but they have never had any kind of belief in the afterlife or anything like that anybody's ever heard of. I suppose they could have one, and they're just keeping it secret from outsiders, but that's a step I'm not really willing to take. But I think it's telling that most do. I think that Sid here has covered the meat and potatoes of it, as far as, well, we tell stories. We are natural seekers of patterns and agency as a survival mechanism. I think he's right about that. I would go a step further and say that because we are also natural storytellers, and because we look for a sense of control, not only just over each other, but over an environment that is sometimes too big for us to manage otherwise, it's comforting to have this kind of, I can influence that mountain to not blow up. I can keep the ground from shaking if I do this. Whereas if you don't have those rituals or those ideas, then the world seems to be a more frightening place. So it offers a sense of freedom from fears, whether it be of death or a simple lack of control. And it makes these things very, very appealing to the point where it's actually a very common thing, an approach for converting people, to try to find a question that a person doesn't have an answer to, because we're naturally uncomfortable with mystery. Well, you don't have an answer, so here's an answer. It fills that hole. Doesn't
interesting? Interesting. Okay, that is interesting. The Black Atheist guy I talked to, that's his name, Black Atheist. And I said, I think I'm gonna change my name to Mexican Christian. What do you think? Or Brown Christian. So, but I asked him, I said, why are you so upfront to have your name out there like that? And he said that he was, because there weren't a lot of Black atheists, he says he was kind of like speaking out for them and kind of like trying to draw them in, say like, hey, I'm one of you. And so I said, like, what's your explanation on why most, probably 99% of Black people are either Christians or believers in something? And he says, well, considering all the mistreatment that blacks and minorities have gotten, that was like a source of comfort for them, right? Either believing in afterlife or believing Jesus or whatever. And so he says it actually makes sense that they would, that they would look to that for comfort. So I thought that was a really interesting analysis that he gave. Next question. Do either of you either believe in one, UFOs, extraterrestrials, flying saucers? And I guess just to ask that question, because obviously, I guess even if you did, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't be supernatural, because you would just believe that it evolved from another planet and somehow was able to cross, right? Robert?
I don't believe that any unidentified extraterrestrial designed crafts have ever visited Earth before. Is it possible? Technically, maybe. Is it probable? No. I mean, I could posit scenarios where that might make it more probable, but I have no reason to believe it.
Sure.
Could they exist elsewhere in the universe? Yeah, I actually think it's very likely. The universe has a minimum of about 2 trillion galaxies. Each one of these galaxies has 10 to 100 billion solar systems. And for this planet, it took only about 500 million years before we see the first evidence of life in the form of the trace fossils that we have. That means that under the right conditions, it's probably not that hard for life to form. If it happened once, it could happen many times over. Whether any of that life has ever overlapped in time with us is another question. It could have arisen, created some bizarro civilizations, and then destroyed themselves before we showed up on the scene. Basically, the same reason you can't have a conversation with Socrates is, because he died before your time, is the same reason it's very unlikely that even if life emerged and it was within reasonable travel distance of us, that we would actually encounter it.
Interesting. That's a very interesting take. What about you, Sid?
I'd agree with that. I mean, the only thing I might add to that is to say, I can't remember who presented this analogy, but somebody said, if you think of the universe like a Christmas tree, okay, and the chances of life are a civilization that exists. Now, for life, for us to detect it, has to be sufficiently advanced that they can alter their world, they can send signals out, they can, do a bunch of stuff that we've basically done. Like we've broadcast TV signals out into space, radios, programs, all that information is traveling as we speak further and further out. Somebody might pick it up. But the analogy this person uses is if you have a Christmas tree with a bunch of light bulbs and each light bulb is a civilization, well, if all the civilizations exist at the same time, which what Robert says, the tree lights up. But if those bulbs are now spaced by time, so for example, like say the ancient Greeks arose and collapsed before I was around. Now we have record evidence of them, but I can't have any contact with Socrates or any of those guys because they're all long dead. But if you want to look out in the universe and we're the only bulb that's lit at the time, but if you time lapse that tree, every bulb would light up and burn out individually over the space of eons, and each bulb would never know any of the other bulbs existed. So and I would say, yeah, the odds are actually fairly decent that we're not the only life in the universe. I just on a reasonable look at like you say, the number of planets, how many planets have liquid water, blah, blah, blah. If you look at that potential pool of places where life like ours could evolve, and who knows, maybe there's life that's not like us at all. It may not be carbon based. It may be silica based and totally weird to what we expect. But regardless, do I think aliens have come and visited us here? I'm highly skeptical of that. I just don't see enough evidence that would be true. And you think if a civilization was going to make contact with us, they'd make contact. It wouldn't be picking up cows in Iowa or landing in Siberia and they would fly to New York City or a big center and make contact.
Seoul. They probably come to Seoul.
There you go. The only other thing I'd want to add to that is maybe we wouldn't want contact with them because one biologist said on Earth most of the intelligent species are predatory. If you extend that out into the universe, if evolution exists on our planet, why wouldn't it exist on other planets? Then maybe we don't want to be contacting civilizations because they might be predatory species off their planet. And that may not be a good thing for us.
By the way, I liked your Christmas tree analogy. The universe, Christmas tree, because Jesus created it. That's why. All
Well,
right.
careful now. The pagans actually created the Christmas tree idea. It wasn't the Christians.
Touche. Okay. Okay, we got like 2 more questions. Actually, okay, let me ask you. You guys go ahead and guys can ask me some questions now.
Well, Robert, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Oh, after you. Go ahead.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, this is so much respect going around.
Yeah, there you go. This is a question I've asked on Facebook a couple different places, and I get different answers, and I don't get. I get some scorn from this question, but I don't mean this question disrespectfully. But how would someone differentiate the supernatural from the non-existent? If it doesn't, like, I believe previous in the conversation you talked about, extra dimensional beings being out there. Well, they could be, but how would I distinguish them from the non-existent if I could ever communicate? If they're on some 8th dimension and I'm not, how could I ever distinguish those things from something that doesn't exist?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that I have. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I will say this: people like Robert's mom or Matt Dillahante's mom, I've known multiple other people who have experienced. They have actually seen these demons. I haven't. So in that sense, I don't really know because I don't know. I don't think you could sit down and have some kind of seance and conjure them. I don't know. It may be the case that you might be able to do that. I honestly don't know. I don't think that we could do a Ouija board, or I think the Ouija board more often than not people are moving it themselves, so I'm not sure if you could contact them. I will say this, that as a Christian, we believe in spiritual warfare. So we believe that prayer actually is spiritual warfare. And so whenever you start to pray and fast, and you guys might have a different kind of an evolutionary thought about fasting, but whenever you start fasting, whenever you fast and pray for extended periods of time, you really start to focus your spirituality, your mind. I've seen it. Like God's a lot more prone to talk to you in that time. Again, you might say because maybe you're dehydrated or whatever, but the Bible does say that we can influence whatever's going on in some way with our prayers. So the times that I've had, but like this, the times that I've had experiences like with God or the demons, it's not like there's anything I'm doing though that's like I'm trying to get anything, it's just kind of just happens sometimes. So I have heard from God, but it's not like I just wake up today and he just talks to me, or like he talked to me yesterday. Yeah. It's like he talked to me. I tell people this is positively true. That he spoke to me like 6 times in 5 months, and then I didn't hear from him for 5 years until I got on the mission field in South Korea. So I don't know if there's some kind of formula or whatever. I'm a little bit kind of like I guess I can't maybe fully answer that. That's a little bit of word salad, but I can't fully answer that question. I definitely know there exists, but I don't know if there's a formula how to contact them. I really don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, fair enough.
I do apologize. I do apologize for that kind of. It is kind of a non-answers.
No, that's fine. It's lots of times there's. I mean, I think Robert mentioned earlier about how people are uncomfortable with. I don't know. I'm perfectly comfortable saying I don't know something. Yeah. I don't know lots of things. I know way less than what I don't know. So, yeah, if somebody has an answer that turns into an I don't know, I'm perfectly fine with that answer. I'm not going to badger anybody if they don't know, because I don't know lots of stuff. Yeah.
Rob.
Okay, so first question I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, is what would prove to you that there was no supernatural?
I don't think that's provable. I guess if you prove would be is if you just defined it as anything that happens is going to be explainable by some kind of natural explanation. So if you say that, then it doesn't matter if I've heard from God. It doesn't matter if God has materialized things in front of me, which I've experienced, where something wasn't there and God spoke to me and then it was there. So I've experienced that. Now, if you want to say someone has theoretically snuck into my room and put it into there, could some alien had some kind of like teleported it, something like that? Absolutely. When I think about the scenarios that could have possibly happened, I get it. Okay, I'll give you one example. I'll give you one example where I wrote this off as possibly somewhat of a supernatural experience, but I didn't want to admit it, so I kind of just like wrote it off the equation. Okay, so I dropped out of Bible college. I went back to visit my roommate in Oregon. So I dropped out, became an atheist, and I shook his new roommate's hand. And when I shook his new roommate's hand, the dude froze up like he just saw a ghost. And he's like, and I'm like, dude, what, like, are you all right? And he's like, dude, you're not going to believe, the guy was freaking out. And that freaked me out because I clearly saw this guy was disturbed. And he said, he said, this has never happened to me before. He says, but when I shook your hand, God spoke to me and he told me to tell you that you are running away from him, and that it didn't matter where you ran around the world, you weren't going to be able to outrun him. And I was like, I said like, bull, you know what, in my mind. But then I started thinking about that. And I was like, how does this guy know that about me? I'm like, did my dad call my roommate and tell, like, I was trying to use logic to ration this away. And I was like, no, that doesn't make sense, because this guy was really freaked out. He was like, you know, like totally freaked out. So, so that being said, I said, well, okay, maybe that's what happened. And shortly after that experience, I went back home, and unfortunately my dad found a box of pornography in my room, and he made me go to this like Christian, yeah, there you go. It happened. I was 18 years old, man. Come on.
I'm not judging.
I'm not saying don't judge it, Rob. All right. So so he made me go to this Christian conference, and so okay. I want to tell you this whole story because this relates to me hearing from God. And if you hear this, you'll probably say that's just the biggest dang coincidence I've ever heard in my life. But okay, I'm just going to throw this out. You listen to the story. So I go back, and the guy who's speaking there, we're at this conference, and the guy's like, you, like you. And I'm like, who, me? And he's like, yeah, you, come here. And I'm there, and I'm freaked out, man, you know. And he's like, he just starts telling me all this stuff. He says probably like 7 things that are like, I'm freaked out, like I'm just shaking. And he's like, and I just dropped out of college, man. I had no money, like literally like 0 money. And he's like, everybody give me $20 right now. And he was one of those Southern Baptists, you know. Everyone started putting 20s in their hand, and he just like, boom. And I'm like, oh, like, and I go back, and as I'm standing there, I'm like freaked out. And then I'm like, I mean, I don't know what to do, but we're taking the ride home with my dad, you know. It's a very awkward ride. And I was like, man, that's crazy. And I was like, oh, I get it. My dad told this dude that he found that pornography and that I dropped out of Bible college, and then he just regurgitated it to me. I was looking for anything I could possibly say that would make me not have to believe in God. Okay, so flash forward, let's say that same guy, okay? The same guy, maybe around 10 years later, let's say about 10 years later, I finally have an experience with Jesus Christ. This guy had not been at my dad's church for about 6 years, and he just happened to be in church the time that I was coming down after I had experience with Jesus Christ, and my family sat me down and said, you're getting into counseling. So they sat me down, they said, you're getting into counseling tomorrow. This is Sunday. So tomorrow morning, your brother's going to take you to counseling. And that guy is speaking there, right? And he tells me, oh, you got to come to my church later on, because my church is like an hour and a half. And this guy who's like way more prophetic than me is going to be there. And he's like, you got to see it. And so this guy has the most prophetic gift I've ever seen. And he's telling me this other guy is like the big shot, right? So I told God today, I said, man, I believe you spoke to me. I'm positive of it. But now my family thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, if I don't hear from you from today, I'm like, I don't want to say anything more. I'm like, I just want to step away from the faith. So I went, I'm sorry. I know this is a long story, but this is the end part.
Fine.
So I went to that. It's an hour and a half away. Again, this is the same day. This guy hasn't been there for 7 years to my dad's church. He invites me there that night. This guy, again, I'm in the service. And he's like, you come here. And I come up, and then he tells me like 20 things, and they recorded it for me. He tells me like 20 things that was going on in my life, like spot on. In fact, he even repeated one of the things that Jesus Christ told me. So that I can say, okay, you would have to say that's a 1 in a trillion% coincidence. In an infinite universe, that's totally, I'll grant you, that's totally likely that something like that could happen. But that's something that is pretty hard. When I've had that experience, Robert, you got to understand, it is not possible for me not to believe in God anymore. It's not possible, So if that's the question you're asking me, I would say nothing. I've experienced Jesus Christ. So any argument you or Sid or any other atheist would make to me would be absolutely irrelevant as far as to say that a supernatural doesn't exist. Sorry for that long story. Sid, you got another question?
Well, I just wanted to add something to that. I get this a lot on Facebook as well when you're debating somebody, and I can't remember who said. I think it was Sam Harris, but I could be wrong. But he said that beliefs aren't voluntary. So you can't arbitrarily just out of the blue believe something or not believe it, right? Beliefs require reasons to hold them. When somebody says to me, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, for instance, do you think elephants can fly? And they say no. And I say, well, okay, now go ahead and believe it. Well, your brain still tells you, no, elephants don't fly. Like, they can't. You can't, without a reason, unless you saw an elephant with wings and it was flying through the air and it looked like an elephant and it was a real animal, unless a bunch of things had progressed where you could reasonably now say, yeah, now I do believe elephants can fly. But you can't just arbitrarily switch a belief on and off.
Right.
Because I've had people say to me, well, you don't believe in God because of X, Y, and Z. And I said, no, I don't believe in God because I don't have a reason to.
Right.
The God you're presenting to me, I have no reason to hold that belief. So,
sure.
Which I never understood the threat when people threaten you with damnation for not believing. Well,
I
have no control over that. I can't control
the
beliefs I hold are because of reasons I've developed.
Right.
Not because I've just decided right out of the blue, I'm going to believe X.
Right.
I need a reason to believe X. That's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
And Sid, I'm gonna say this. I'm kind of a different, unique kind of Christian because I say it is 100% on God to prove himself to you or to me or to anyone. So it makes no logical sense that God could, in my mind, that God could condemn someone for not believing in him when it's incumbent on him as a father. Like, I would not say like to my daughter, like, I'm going to punish you if you don't believe in me. Like, it's my responsibility to take care of my daughter, So
I guess what I was saying was I was trying to support your position that if you have a reason that you believe is true, why you believe.
Right.
And my response to that would be, well, okay, that's, why would I try to change? Like, why would I say, oh, you're dumb for believing that? You shouldn't believe that. Well, you have reasons to believe that.
Right.
And reasons and those reasons aren't arbitrary, the beliefs aren't arbitrary. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can turn a switch in your head and just say, well, now I believe, now I don't, now I believe, now I don't. I'm just saying it works both ways. When people are sincere and say to me, well, I believe in God and I've had this experience and this is why I believe it. Okay, that's great. Who am I to tell you that belief's wrong? I mean, that's not in me. It's not my position. So, yeah.
One, I really, really appreciate that too, Sid. I mean, I think you're a good guy. I would be, if we get to heaven and, I would be an advocate for you guys and saying like, please, man, like these guys, I don't know why. People ask me, why did God speak to you? Why did God? I'm like, dude, I ask myself that question all the time. Like, that's not fair. It's not fair. God would speak to me multiple times. It's not fair. I tell God, that's not fair. I pray for people. I pray for Muslims, for atheists, for Jews, for gays, for trans, all those people. Like I don't try to use my faith to hurt people. You know, I know what I experienced. I have no idea. It baffles my mind. As you said, like, it's not like you're trying to be disobedient. It's not like you're saying, F you God. You're saying, I don't have a reason to believe in this, right? I totally get that, Sid. I totally respect that. I totally respect that, brother. So I really appreciate you giving your opinion.
Okay, so would you be willing to subject your belief in divine communication to a falsifiable test? And to kind of explain what I mean here is, if all of this is internal to you, then your deity, in this case, can't know what you don't know. But if it is external and has access to information that you don't, then it is falsifiable to a reasonable degree, whether or not this communication is in fact actually happening, or whether or not it's all in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I would test that is to create a randomized multi-digit sequence of letters, numbers, symbols. And then when this communication happens, in order to validate that, ask for that code can be provided. Dogs.
Your dog?
That was the dog. If that key combination can be provided, then you are in fact accessing some external knowledge that you couldn't have known. But if it can't be, it's probably all in your head.
Well, in the story that I've told you, those were multiple times external stuff that was happening, not just once, not just twice, not just 3 times, not just 4 times, not just 5 times, at least 10 different times that these things happen. Hold on, let me finish. So you're asking me if this solely happened into my mind. So this happened 3 different times. And again, I've experienced multiple times where you might say there's some kind of naturalistic explanation, but multiple times where God spoke to me and then he materialized something in front of me. So you might say, okay, maybe it was actually there and I just didn't see it, and then it just happened to be there. I know that God spoke to me and then immediately after it happened. So, but if the question specifically what you're talking about in your question, probably, but I'm probably sure that I would fail, because I don't claim, I do not claim that God speaks to me every day. I told you prior to coming down here to Mokpo, I did not hear from God for 5 years. And then I came down here and he spoke to me for 7 hours. 7 hours straight, he spoke to me. And I'm telling you, this is after, 5 years where I felt like, man, I've sinned so much, I've messed up so much that, that he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. I genuinely felt that way. And so to answer your question, I don't think I would pass that test. I would positively strap a TNT bomb onto myself and take a lie detector test and say, I know I would pass, to say, I know I had these experiences. Even if they weren't true, I know that I would pass, in the sense that at least I believe that if you just went by, did I believe that this happened? Absolutely. But I don't think I would pass a test that would probably suit you scientifically. Let's say that.
It doesn't have to be right now. I'd be happy to create a sequence, save it, and next time this happens, just ask for that as confirmation. And then you can bring it to me, and I'll tell you whether or not you got it right. It's fine if you don't. That's okay. I mean, you're welcome to say no, because as you say, this may not happen for years. It may not ever happen again.
Right.
Call it a failsafe.
Okay. So you're gonna be a Christian if that does happen?
Honestly, don't know. I can't predict that.
I got you, buddy. Yeah.
Actually, I can't answer. I can't answer that. I can't answer that, and the answer to that is no.
Well, what's the point? What's the point?
Here's the I'll answer that.
I'm gonna waste God's time.
I'll answer that question too. The reason that if you convinced me that Christianity was true, I would believe that it was true, but I would not be a Christian, because I do not believe it is a moral religion.
Okay.
So you could convince me that it's true, but my conscience would not allow me to be part of it.
Fair enough.
The same is true. A Muslim asked me the same thing about Islam. If they could convince me that it was true, would I be a Muslim? And the answer is no. I don't consider it to fit my my morals. You could convince me that a deity existed, maybe even that it was yours, but I must follow the dictates of my conscience, and that would prevent me from subordinating myself to something I believe is morally wrong.
Very valid point. And with that being said,
Yes.
we're going to close this this podcast. But before we do, I want you to give. You can take up to 5 minutes here. I want you to explain about your son. That's a very, very, very touching story. This probably be Sid's first time to hear it, but if you can explain about what the causes he was interested in, and we're going to put a GoFundMe page here. I'm going to make a contribution. I usually send out gift cards to the participants who participate in R.H.E. podcast. And so rather than sending out your gift card, I'm just going to make a donation to this GoFundMe page. So Robert, the spotlight is on you, buddy.
Okay, so back in 2013, my son, he grew ill, and he passed away very suddenly. He got spinal meningitis and slipped into a coma and never woke up. Some years ago, one of the things I did to honor his memory around the time that he got sick was I donated to some causes.
Hey, I'm so sorry. What's that noise? Okay, stop. Okay, I'm sorry.
Noise?
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, the dog was drinking. The dog was drinking.
Yeah, it was like we're at the crescendo, and I hear like. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
I'm so sorry, Robert. I'm so sorry. Can you please start again, because I this is a very important part, and I don't want it. I just want the audio to be great. Okay, please. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, not a problem. So some years ago, my son grew sick and fell into a coma, spinal meningitis, a very, very strain, and he passed away. Every year since, in order to honor his memory, I have, around his birthday and around the anniversary of his death, I would contribute things to various causes. A couple of years ago, I did, blood donations. My little fandom actually got involved, and they donated food to food banks, blood to blood banks, and we even helped send a couple of kids to a school in Uganda so they could get an education. My son was also very anti-death penalty. He said it wasn't fair because you could kill the wrong person. Innocent people can pay for that, and it wasn't right. So, we've done donations to, anti-death penalty things, or paid for vaccinations, things of that nature, in order to continue to give him a positive impact on the world that he was very fond of. So that's something that we have continuously done.
What are we going to be donating to, man?
The kids that I helped send to school some years ago are graduating now. There was 2 boys, and they are ready to go to college, and I wanted to kind of help fund their attempt at furthering their education and bettering their lives. So a couple of days ago, I went ahead and created a GoFundMe for that purpose. School in Uganda is not tremendously expensive. You're looking at about $1,000 a year per kid for a 4-year university. I would be happy if I could just, pay for ideally all of it. But if I can't do all of it, I would like to do something as close to that as possible, even if it's only partial.
Wow. That's
if I could raise if I could raise 1,000 for each of them, and I can just do this every year until they graduate, that would be start enough.
Robert, you're a very you're a credit to humanity. I really wish I could have met your son. He sounds like my type of person. I mean, I think we would have gotten along well. But that being said, we are going to post a link to that. Thank you for that. I could very well.
I'll send it to you.
I could very well imagine had I lost my daughter, that would cost me. I could very well imagine that. So
it's It's not a thing I would wish on anyone. It really isn't. Some people, I manage though, and remember.
That being said, I really want to thank both of you guys for joining me today. That's a very interesting topic, and really appreciate you sharing, Robert. And yeah, we're just moving this conversation along, and sometimes some difficult conversations, and sometimes some funny conversations. I try to use some comedy whenever I can to kind of break it up, but yeah. Thank you guys for joining me today, and we look forward to seeing you back in the next episode of R.H.E. Podcast. Goodbye.